I use this indigenous ceremonial change process with we'll begin with the first phase, which I'm calling naming, because in our culture, the naming is fundamental because we have to know the name of the diagnostic of the out of balance condition first before we would know what the ceremony for it is. And then we would have to know what the herbs are for a remedy if it calls for those specific herbs, and they usually do. So naming is fundamental, and this naming is what is out of balance. We usually understand this if I remind people that we use the doctor to with the tools of x-ray and blood tests, and we go to the mechanic to get a diagnosis printout of the condition of our vehicle and what it needs to be repaired. But we are not even thinking about or designing or planning how to make decisions accordingly to what is out of balance by naming it, and certainly what is necessary in this context of naming is to identify the root cause. What is the root cause of this out of balance condition that maintains and perpetuates the out of balance condition? We are usually putting our time, our money, our resources, our human resources, and everything that we have in the domain of health and government and schooling and social services. We're spending time and energy and resources on all the symptoms, but I have yet to observe or experience or discover that anyone is identifying root cause that keeps that out of balance of those symptoms out of balance. So by naming the out of balance and identifying the root cause that perpetuates the out of balance condition and symptoms, then the symptoms over time will self-correct, because this dismantling or deconstructing the root cause is how we change something that is an obstacle to our physical, emotive, and spiritual health and well-being, yet we're not even identifying how to eliminate the root cause by deconstructing and dismantling it. And so this comes from authentic ceremonies. We call this ceremony it has a name, and it's the beginning of every single ceremony. Every ceremony begins with naming what is out of balance and identify the root cause. And in previous times, and even today in some places, there are diagnostic ceremonies that are all-night ceremonies. And so the reason why it's an all-night ceremony is from sundown to midnight is to describe and to understand the name of the out of balance and why it's creating all the symptoms that one is experiencing that causes pain and suffering. and looking to identify the root cause. And of course, it would be problems in living or addiction or sickness or even mental health issues. Um, we don't really have uh, mental health, mental illness, because mental illness is really about thinking that is twisted thinking. It's thinking that's not congruent. So that's something to really understand. It's important that when we know that our thinking is telling our body wrong information, where do we go to find out how to? Well, the indigenous ceremonial change process is how to identify the root cause of the out of balance condition. And it's very specific. And because it's specific, then there is a way to deconstruct it. And I like to give this example because I'm just going to arbitrarily say, for our purposes, that we all know that war is out of balance condition. And so by naming it as an out of balance condition, there's much to say about war, and I'm just basically going to identify arbitrarily again that the root cause is America's addiction to greed. And I say that because of the enormous amounts of money being spent on military weaponry and atomic weaponry to annihilate the human race. So that's one example of naming an out of balance and then identifying the root cause, which means that leads us into the next phase, the emptying phase, and I will articulate that accordingly on the video on phase 2, which is emptying. However, if we use this in our daily life, imagine we would not be arguing, we would not be confronting, we would not be debating, we would just simply have dialogue and conversation and agree to follow a sequencing that leads to designing co-creative solutions that are practical and realistic in our everyday life, in our decision making. That's what I call common sense. And so the diagnostic characteristics of our language is how I wanted to use words in English that convey this, that are accurate, and that they convey the authenticity of the actual ceremonies that have been ongoing to date, to this day, for generations and centuries and thousands of years. So when people ask me, well, Patricia, does it work? And my reply is always, I ask the question back to these people and ask them, you tell me, does the earth work? Does gravity work? Does the water work? Does the sun work for giving us life and warmth and keeping us warm and growing our food? Does the water really work in terms of it's the life energy as well? So does the earth, does the water, does the fire, does the air, does our in-breath and out-breath really work? You're asking me a question about whether you are alive and making a sound and moving around with these 4 sacred elements of our Constitution And that is what we're using. That's the power that we're using in the Indigenous ceremonial change process. That's the power of truth. And I'm going to say truth is the only real power. And that truth is also our protection because it's the actual basis of equality that and the natural order laws that govern us all equally.